Welcome everyone. I have a few slides to get us started. Today we're talking about formative and summative assessment, but I hope that this is the beginning of a good dialogue. And for those, the follow-up in 2 weeks will be an opportunity if you have some formative and summative assessments that you're doing that you would like to share, to bring those back in 2 weeks and share those with others. I truly believe that we are so much better together and when we can share ideas and resources. And as we begin to learn more about what each other are doing, it really helps with scaffolding across courses and making sure that we not only know what's going on in our course, but have a good idea of what is going on in other courses as well, and that we're building on information. Because one of the things we've all been sort of probably accused of at one point or the other is our students have said, well, we already heard that, or we've done that. So we hope that we're really clear with students what we're teaching them, particularly as we implement the new essentials curriculum, is really very intentionally building and creating those building blocks through time. So are there any questions before we get started? No? Okay.
Nope. Nope.
Okay, well, I have some nice Jesuit slides here. Oh, okay. All right, so our objectives and subjectives, I'll talk a little bit about subjectives here in a second, is to describe the difference between formative and summative assessment and sort of really together explore some authentic assessments as part of backward design, and then finally explain the assessment strategy created for a course currently being revised. As most of you know from Bloom's taxonomy, there's 3 domains of learning: the cognitive, the psychomotor, and the affective. But when we look at a lot of what we teach and what is the most emphasized, it's historically been which two?
Psychomotor and cognitive.
Right, right. We spend a lot of time on cognitive and psychomotor, and maybe not so much time on affective, although I would like to argue that in Jesuit education, we probably do a better job at that due to our courses and our formation courses than perhaps other universities. But there are the 3 domains of learning, and it's really important that we make sure that we're covering all domains in our courses. And so along that vein, I think some of the reason why perhaps we don't focus on affective so much is because we're always looking at objectives, and we're focusing on the objectives of a course and the objective learning outcomes. And actually, much of affective learning is subjective. And so one of the critiques that we're moving forward nationally is to not only think about objectives in learning, but it's equally important to think about subjectives in learning. And there's research now in the higher education literature that really speaks to that, like, students learn best when they have some sort of emotional context to the learning. If they have some experience in their own life they can draw upon, or you have touched their heart in some way. We know from their clinical experiences that affect is often what they recall most about their experience with a patient, is those feelings that arose and how they responded to those. And so many people begin with icebreakers. It's to get that person engaged, to get that subjective learning. So we're encouraging you to think. I think sometimes it's hard in higher education to because we're not always conceptually clear. We're not always literate about the language that we're using. And when we're using only objectives and we say we want to embrace effective learning, well, that's really inconsistent when we're not considering the value of subjective learning as well as objective learning. So I created this table and adapted it from Bloom's taxonomy as a way to think about the subjective or affective learning, and what are the words that we might use, and these aren't mutually exclusive. Like you can see that there's describe in both the cognitive domain and the affective domain in this example, but we are most of the verbs that we use in learning is on that cognitive and psychomotor domain, and most of the what we measure and the outcomes we are looking for are objective measures, right? And so if we're going to really embrace affective learning, we need to think about subjectively how we might evaluate subjective learning, and it's going to be different than objective learning. So this is just an example of, so when we're teaching ethics and we want, for example, we might want to get into that valuing where we have students explore their values. When we're teaching disciplinary knowledge, when we're teaching Jesuit tradition, it's an important opportunity to talk about students' values, and that's where we're inviting them and we're encouraging them to join and initiate and engage. So those are verbs that we may use for affective learning. And I think this is a good time to pause here, and I'm gonna share with you and these are just notes that I took when Nancy and I
We're at the AACN conference.
Yeah, I have. Oh, I thought I had it pulled up. I guess I don't have it pulled up. But I took some notes. They're right here. I can send them to you. But they were really matching Bloom's taxonomy to actual learning activities, which is really nice. So, for example, if you want to do something related to remembering, like how would you test memory and what kind of assignment would you give? Well, they recommend a multiple choice test if you want to remember something. Whereas if you want students to understand, that would be better for a paper or a case study or a concept map. Applying, again, would be a case study or a simulation. Analyzing, they recommend projects and debates or case studies. Evaluating would be a good place for a journal or a case review. Creating is a good place for research projects and essays and teaching material, developing teaching materials. And then other ideas for assessment might be video reflections, podcasts, journal clubs, those sort of things. But to think about, so we're kind of juggling a lot to think about. We're not just thinking about what verb are we going to use for this, but does the verb align with the learning activity that we're doing? And are we balancing our verbs as cognitive, psychomotor, and affective? So it's that we think about all of that as we're creating, and it's a lot to juggle in our minds at one time. So I think it's an important consideration. I'll start sharing again here. Okay. All right. So some other thoughts on language besides adding conceptual clarity to acknowledging that we have both objective and subjective learning is also other words to is to consider not just competencies, but also literacies. That competencies is sort of a static term that sort of insinuates once you reach competency, you're sort of finished. But we know in nursing that we're really never finished, right? Nursing is something that's lifelong. We need continuing education all the time. So we're constantly, and it's a formation and it's an ongoing formation, part of lifelong learning. So when we think about competency, I think of horizontal learning, that we reached a level of competency, we've gotten over that hurdle. And I think of literacy as that vertical learning that continues throughout our lives. So for me, that helps me to think, I don't know, I've always had this sort of, the word competency has sort of rubbed me a little bit. It's like competency is a B minus or a C minus. I want more of that for myself and for those that I work with. So, and then also when Nancy and I were at AACN, they talked about developing and developed and well developed. And we recommend thinking about language that is more in alignment with transformative learning. And while the AACN Essentials talks about wanting transformative learning, their language is not necessarily consistent with transformative learning. So again, I've talked to Joan Stanley directly about this, and she says, you know, they're a work in progress as well. So they're open to being critiqued. And we just sent Joan Stanley a paper on these very ideas on language for her to review and give us some feedback on. But us to think about when we're working with students in the early stages, it's that informative stage, and then we learn into that formative stage, and then as they're ending their program and moving on, that we're moving them into that transformative stage of learning. So what does this mean for our assessments, and what is the difference between formative and summative assessment? So formative assessment really refers to various methods we use, and I think of as is that process. It's the process of learning. It's those steps we take along the way to reach an endpoint. So it's an opportunity, in my mind, for students to practice. And it's that incremental stages that we help and guide students through along the way. So it can be part of a lesson, a unit, and a building block throughout a course. And formative assessment is really feedback oriented. It can be informal or it can be more formal. It supports the learning goals, and it promotes student engagement. So formative assessment is an awesome place to put discussions and case studies where they read each other's work and give each other feedback, peer review. It's group projects. It's an awesome time for students to work together and learn together. And then adjustment tools. Examples of formative assessments are think, pair, and shares, 1-minute papers, peer review, reflective journals, again, groups. When you do a classroom poll, if you're using polls, that's a form of formative assessment. Care plans is a formative assessment, and then whenever we do role plays and simulations. And the goals of formative assessment are really to support learning and the instructional process, but really to foster a classroom culture of improvement and that incremental learning along the way. And it's really recommended that we use a variety of formative assessments so that we can meet various student learning styles and ultimately enhance students' achievement. Okay, and then let's focus now, switch gears a little bit and think about summative assessments. So summative assessments are the higher stakes learning. They are focused on educational outcomes. They measure achievement of a benchmark or a standards, and they really authenticate student learning. And examples of summative assessments can be things like final projects, exams, papers, presentations, those final simulations that they do for those final checkoffs. And then at the graduate level, it could be theses and dissertations, quality improvement projects. And then the overall goal for summative assessment is to demonstrate that they've achieved their educational outcomes. And it's our kind of social contract to society as a university that we are delivering a promise to society that we're creating students that are educated and meet the professional standard and are prepared to sit for their licensing or certification exams, and they're ready to and prepared to be successful in their careers. So I'm going to pause there. Are there any questions or comments? Well, if not, I'm going to just share. This is an example of a course that Erica Hooper and I put together, and it's called Wellness, Mind, Body, and Spirit. And you can see this is a table that we took out of a manuscript. We published this this course. We published it in a creativity journal, the Nursing Creativity Journal, and you can see we have the assignments listed in that first column, and then the purpose of the assignment in the second one. And for our purposes, because we were integrating caring science into this course, we also aligned it to the Caritas processes that that we were focusing on in making sure that we covered in each learning activity. So the deal, I'll talk a little bit more about each of these assignments. We'll follow up on these, but you can begin to think about your courses this way. What is your assignment? What's getting really clear on what the purpose of that assignment is, and then how does it align with the sub-competencies and competencies? That's kind of what we're doing with our mapping tools, is getting to this. So this is just something that Erica and I did. Oh, we did this about 2 years ago and got it published last year. So the first assignment, and you guys, like, this will probably be on my gravestone someday, the deal model, because I love it so much. But I had the opportunity to work with Patty Clayton, and I met Sarah Ash. These are two Midwestern faculty who are experts in education. And so this assignment is really well developed and researched, and they've done research on it, and it's really based on Paul's original work on critical thinking that was done decades ago. But it's a great opportunity to bring in, the reason I love it is it brings in subjective and objective learning. It's a way to bring in students' experiences along with literature, and then it gives the students an opportunity to reflect and articulate on their learning. So this, and then the other thing about the deal model is it can be used as a whole, like a paper. It can be used you can just do the describe, like in a group discussion, you could just do the describe. You could do the describe and the examine as a paper, and you could do the articulation of learning as a discussion. You can mix this assignment up as many ways as you want, and Ash and Clayton talk about that in their article. But basically, when I use it as a paper, I have the students For this class, we had them write about a story when you were really cared for when you were ill, or you cared for someone else who was ill, and share that story. And we have them write it as a rich description, like it's like not like they were reading a novel. Give us all the details. Tell us the whole story. How did you feel? What were you thinking? Just really write a rich description about that story, and they can write for 3 or 4 pages. And so in the wellness course, we have them write the description week 1 of the class. Tell us your story. This should not be a hard paper to write because you're writing from your heart. You don't need to look anything up. You don't need to do any homework. Just tell us the story that's your story. And then over the course of the semester, they read on wellness from different perspectives. They get into literature on self-compassion. They get into the caring science literature. They look at other nursing theories. And then at the end of the semester, they go back and they reread their story, and they examine it according to the literature they read and the readings they read over the course of the semester. And they integrate those readings into the examination. And then finally, in the last section, and there's prompts, there's open-ended questions for the examination that Ash and Clayton share. And we adapted them and wrote our own. And then the last section of the paper is that you articulate the learning that arises. And so what happens is, which is where we see the transformative learning, is when the students first describe their experience at the beginning of the semester, it's a very affective story with some objective components, but the examine really helps them to look at it more objectively and through a professional lens and integrating literature. And then at the final stage, the articulating learning, is where you see the actual real transformation in their thinking about this experience. They're able to look at it in a completely different light. And it's very, very much a transformative learning assignment, and often brings me to tears because there's just so much deep learning and growth that occurs, mainly because they're writing on their own experiences. So they're writing about things that they're really, really passionate about. They're writing about the death of a family member. They're writing about someone with a mental illness. They're writing and how they tried to care for them. They might be writing about, oftentimes it involves some sort of serious illness or death. And so that they're very emotional papers, but it really helps them to then sort of get that emotion out. And the research really shows that it's like the emotion that has to come out first, and then we can do the more objective learning. So this assignment is really in alignment with that. So the other thing I like about the deal that Ash and Clayton have is they provide prompts for the examination based on personal growth, civic engagement, or academic advancement. So you can decide, for the purpose of your course, are you wanting your students to examine this paper for personal growth? Are you wanting them to examine the paper for civic engagement? Or are you wanting them to examine the paper for academic advancement? So this is where, for a leadership course, or the course that, the wellness course, Eric and I were looking for personal and professional growth. But for like a pharmacology course or a physical assessment course, you could also use this paper, but it would be for academic advancement. Civic engagement is often related to courses that have like community health, or when they're doing a capstone project or a leadership project that they're doing with others. It could be for civic engagement, and they provide specific prompts for the students to use to examine based upon the goal of the paper. Are you wanting the students to develop personally and professionally their growth, civic engagement, or academic advancement? And then finally, the prompts for the final stage of the paper are to articulate their learning. And these prompts stay the same, but they ask the students to consider, what did I learn? How did I learn it? Why is it important, and what will I do because of it? A commitment to change paper is another really, so this paper is both formative. I think the way we use it is both formative when we have them do the describe at the beginning of the semester, and then when we have them do the examine and the articulation of learning at the end of the semester, it becomes a summative assessment. So this paper is sort of both formative and summative. The commitment to change paper, this is an assignment I learned from the IPAC community about 15 years ago. And the goal of this paper is for students to really share how they see themselves being transformed by their experiences in a course. And so the questions that they analyze are, for the wellness course, we have them identify 3 areas that they want to change in their ability to care for themselves as a result of this course. And what are we have them choose 2 to 3 changes that they want to commit to making. And so, and then they have to share what will be the obstacles to making these changes, what will be the value of making them, and how can these values help them to work towards achieving their change. And so this is a assignment that Erica and I used at the midpoint of the semester, where we get them, it's like, okay, you've been halfway through the course, you've identified the 2 to 3 things that you're most passionate about in relationship to this course. What are the things that you want to thread and carry through and take away, and sort of what's getting in the way, and how can you overcome that, and what will help you to achieve that. Journals and reflection videos, another formative assessment, assists learners to grow in their ability to respond and become more reflective practitioners, to think about their thinking. And I think most of the literature really says, there's reflection in action, reflection on action, and there's also like reflection before action. And it's, I think we learn to be more reflective in the moment, but we begin by reflecting on our actions. And we know that we've been doing post conferences with students in clinical placement settings. And so creating opportunities for, and this is an important part of Jesuit education, is to create reflective practitioners. And part of our Jesuit pedagogy and the Ignatian pedagogy is reflection. So are we having opportunities for reflection? Eric and I use a reflection video assignment. It's the way the students introduce themselves to one another, because this is an online course, and they do like a 2-minute video introducing themselves and saying why they chose to take this course. And it's a fun way for them to all watch each other's videos. We have them keep them to just a couple of minutes, and we go through and watch their videos and then give them feedback. Sort of a quick activity. For this course, this is another formative assessment. We use self-care plans. Erica developed this the self-care plan guide, and it was based on, I think, a faculty member she worked with when she was in school at USF, and adapted it. So we have students complete a self-care plan of how they're going to care for themselves. And then finally, for this course, at the end of the semester, it's, because this is an online course, it's not required, but we do alter their end of the semester requirements if they choose to. One option is to actually choose an online healing circle and experience a healing circle, and write a brief reflection on that. So that's sort of examples of how we use formative and summative assessments in one class. And you can see the deal assignment is really the only summative assessment, and the majority of our assignments in our courses will be formative assessments, but we do need one or two summative assessments. Oftentimes summative assessments end up being things like presentations and papers or exams that are more near the end of the semester. And then I wanted to share with you if I can find it here. Yeah, Ashton Clayton. I'll share this article with you. It's almost silly because it's so old, but it's so good. I mean, this has been
Good.
but they also have the rubric that they use, and you can see the critical thinking rubric for grading their papers. You can see that what they're looking for in this first column is there's accuracy, clarity, depth, breadth, and fairness. So you can see that these that they're and then this rubric and all this work was based on Paul's original work on critical thinking, but there's they explain as I tried to do in this article. They share the rubric and the reflective questions and strategies you ask and the reasons. They identify Bloom's taxonomy here in the examples of learning related behaviors. They align again the classifications with their learning related behaviors, and provide just really clear and logical explanation of really what we're trying to achieve in moving towards competency-based education. So it also, you can see in this figure 4, if you can see all that, but it talks about here the category 1, and that's if you're looking at the category 1 type of objective would be if we're working on personal growth, and the category 2 is if the paper is about civic engagement, and the category 3 is if it's about academic achievement. And so that's where when you get to the examine part of the paper that the questions would be different depending on the goal of the paper. But you start out with the student's experience and engage the student through being able to share their own experience. And then you branch off and ask reflective questions and have them write based upon the category. And then again, come back to the articulation of learning, which you hope then re-engages them to have a deeper understanding of their experience that sort of leads to that transformative learning cycle. Okay, so I am going to stop there and just open it up for dialogue and thoughts, questions. Hi, Anne.
Well, I really liked the beginning portion when you were talking about the objective and subjective wording around learning outcomes. And I think that I was just, I'll just share an experience I had this morning actually in class, because I'm teaching an evidence-based practice course, right? And the students are juniors, and it's hard for them because they haven't had a lot of clinical experience yet. And I know that they're focused on, the next midterm that they need to get to, and psych community health, and, their patho, foundational courses, et cetera, and learning to be a nurse. So sometimes these topics can feel very irrelevant. And so in the spirit of that, trying to, kind of make some connections, I actually decided today to switch it up a bit. And I had them in the beginning actually do a values assessment for themselves, because I thought, I mean, it's great to talk about this in the abstract or even in a very empiric way, but what are you going to do with the information? And part of that is establishing as your own professional identity as a nurse. Where are you with a lot of the issues you're going to be facing? And I tried to make that. So trying to, again, to your point, not hearing this lecture, to approach more of the subjective learning, and that you would hope would happen in the class. And then at the end of the class, I decided again to try to move it to a little bit more of a effective domain of learning, because I know I learned this the hard way, but in practice, I learned this myself, that when I'd go to a conference and if I would see a video or hear just something visual, or hear a speaker that really spoke to me, it made the change kind of mandatory. I think often about developmentally supportive care in the NICU population, and I'd gone to this conference and it was just so impactful. They showed a video of what it was like for kids to be in an intensive care unit with all the unrelenting noise sounds, and the trauma, the kind of environment that we created. And it was a foundation for the beginning of really changing the whole unit environment to be more developmentally supportive. That affected me. And I remember saying to myself, that's going to happen in my unit. I don't care what it takes. We're going to change. So then, and Sarah had shared with me the Caring Science video from Jean Watson. It's called A Caring Moment. And it's just an absolutely beautiful, it's what, about 7 minutes long. And she just walks through, really what it's all about, in terms of who we are as professionals. Why are we in this field? Why, and it's an emotional. So those two, it's kind of like stair steps. At the beginning of the class, I wanted them to think about their values. At the end, to walk away, it's spring break, really be thinking about, okay, well, this is evidence-based practice. Great. But how am I going to use this? How is it going to change who I am as a person, who I am as a nurse, and how I use it in my daily practice? So I think effective learning is really, and I deviated this time from, I didn't barely do any lecturing at all. It was a 3.5 hour class. So there was a lot of, independent work for them to do. I had all these different learning activities, but it's interesting because you're also, when you do this, you're kind of working against a culture of students who were kind of wanting to know, okay, just give it to me. What do I need to know? Give me the lecture, give me the. So I think it just reinforced, this is just, I don't mean to be editorializing, but it reinforced for me my commitment to really helping students to get out of that mindset, because they won't be effective as nurses if that's their viewpoint about education. Just give it to me, give me the knowledge so I can spit it back to you. And yet a lot of our situations, a lot of our settings, according to, as we keep talking about this, has promoted that. So that's where I see about the most exciting thing about the CBE and the new essentials approach. It's helping us, I think, to be more innovative in how we teach, to be able to get to that end goal of practice ready nurses. So it's, anyway, so I'll stop talking there. But I really like the subjective, affective, objective and subjective approach. And formative and summative assessments kind of go along with that. It's just all the things I was kind of talking about are formative assessments of some sort. They're learning assessments. So I'll stop talking.
No, I love how you started with talking about research with values, because so much of our problems with using the evidence and not connecting that to the person that we're
Mhm.
caring for. And so really starting students with really exploring their values and how values inform how they use evidence, right?
Right,
Beautiful.
right. I was also struck because I think the deal assignment is very similar, just different words and different than Ignatian pedagogy. I mean, it's really not, it's the same kind of process, circular process of, looking at the context and the experience and then reflecting and then taking some action.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, I used that assignment with master's psych and P students at IU, and I had them write about either caring for, and these are all graduate students, so they've been practicing nurses, to write about a patient or a family member or friend who had some sort of mental illness. And a lot of them wrote about substance use disorders, and many of them wrote about them in their own families. And there's
mhm,
so much emotion in these papers, so much anger, resentment, turmoil, so they really put their heart into these initial papers. And then to have them over the course of the semester read about the neurobiology of the brain and family dynamics and what's happening neurologically for folks with substance use disorders, and what about the different treatment approaches and how our what's the implications for families, and exploring the idea of harm reduction models versus shame and blame models, and then to re-look at those papers at the end of the semester and to re-examine those experiences in light that were filled with so much raw emotion, and to
mhm,
re-look at those after reading the literature and attending the classes. Huge transformation.
mhm.
So yeah, it can be those assignments, I think, are really powerful. And if we can break them so that there's some way to, it's like a scaffolding in a way that we
Yeah.
can thread the material through the course. Yeah. Hi, Alicia.
That-
I am sorry I was so late. I was
It's
in
okay.
other meetings, but I'm very, very interested in this topic, especially as a new faculty member.
Well, we're recording it, so we'll make sure and get you the recording.
Thank you so much. I would really appreciate that.
But we were talking about formative and summative assessment. So did in light of any of this, are there any ideas on that came up during the course of this where you might want to make some adjustments in your own courses, or it gave you some ideas for your courses?
I think for me, I don't know. I mean, I was thinking about it, and I think in terms of our program, I think that it would be really good to, at the end of a program, to have both a transformational exercise in the program. I think the BSN does that with capstone and the capstone experience. In fact, John Hurley was just talking to me the other day about he's kind of changed his capstone a bit, and he's having the students write about, how have you, over the course of the semester, how have you been practicing cura personalis this week?
Mhm.
And then same thing, how have you been a person for others, person for and with others this week? And then how have you been a contemplative in action this week, looking beyond the superficial? And he's noticed over the course of half a semester, the transformation that's happening in the students.
Mhm.
Mhm, mhm,
In fact, he said it's been really moving for him that, especially in being person for others, I gave medications, or I, learned how to walk a patient who was, walking with a hanging medication, to being with wanting to be a healing presence for people,
mhm, mhm.
seeing that happen with the students. So I think that's really a good thing. And I think in the MEMSN program, we don't have that necessarily. We've got the project. We don't really have um, a course. We have an ethics and policy course, but I don't, I just don't, especially if that's the only ethics they're getting and the only policy course that they're getting, you don't have an opportunity to really delve into the transformative experience that they've had over the course of 6 semesters. And I think we need to look at that. On the other hand, since I'm at the very beginning, I was just thinking it's it's a hard lift, it seems to me, and I've only done this now for a semester and a half, and I'm doing the Jesuit values piece, which we don't have on the main campus, but down here, but also because we don't have, at least what I have discovered, much of an EBP course it's kind of tied in with other things. I think they're supposed to get it by osmosis, but I really think you need to have, it's part of the transformation, as it were, of having students begin to see themselves not just as ethical, but also evidence-based professionals as well, and how to communicate well that. And right now, at least in the School of Nursing and Health Professions, we're still using APA, for example. And I hate to reduce everything to APA, but I do think that it is a way of getting everybody to communicate well and to take responsibility for their writing, how to acknowledge, thoughts that they are getting from other people, so to avoid plagiarism, to get them prepared. So, and all that to say, I find I'm doing more informative work than both maybe the higher levels. If you're talking about Bloom's taxonomy, I'm doing more of getting people on a common foundation first so that they can then go into their other courses. And I'm hoping that they're able to write well, that they're able to assess well, that they can add an ethical component. I did case studies. The students are first going into the sisters' Regina House, their very first clinical, and we did case studies about dealing with older people. And how do you approach somebody who's bursts into tears or something, And I said, now think about what we talked about. What is cura personalis about? How do you do that? And what would you do? Well, bringing that to a case study or to a real human, they can write about it now. I mean, they do that real well, but then how to put that into action now is, I think, where the clinical has to be. And which shows me we really have to have more of a bridge with our clinical partners, that they understand what's going on in the classroom so that they can help make those bridges, that I'm not sure is happening if they aren't as engaged with us of what's happening in the classroom. So those are just some of the thoughts that came to my mind. I don't know if you have any response to that, Sarah, but.
No, I think that's beautiful. And what you reminded me of, well, whenever I see you, Tim, I think of two things, Jesuit education and ethics. So I had a conversation with a colleague that was on the phone with ANA about the new code of ethics that they're revising this year. And they're actually going to be it's going to be a major overhaul, apparently, this time. And they're adding a 10th provision to the Code of Ethics. And that 10th provision is going to have, I think, it's my understanding, if I understood, not 9 components. And the first 3 components have to do with the RN's relation, the nurse's relationship with the patient, being that person for others. The next 3 have to do with the professional obligations to one's colleagues. And the last 3 have to do with the professional nurse's relationship with her organization and community and society. And so I think that fits with that formation piece and reconnecting with values and that broader, taking on that broader perspective, that it's not just, that code of ethics is not just about what we do with our patients, but sounds like they're really rethinking about the entire code of ethics based upon really what's happening in the world, and needing for a broader and more global understanding and application of ethics and values in nursing education, which you beautifully shared how you're doing that. So,
It sounds like it's more, I'm really glad to hear that. And it's more relational,
mhm.
focus, which again, um, that's the foundation of nursing, is that patient relationship with the nurse and the nurse's relationship with the family, with the community. And if we don't keep emphasizing that, then it really just becomes um, just a series of tasks that we're doing, and we
Mhm.
will be replaced by a robot. I think that the healing experience is one of that of relation with and that's with the students. They still in the mindset of cure, and I keep saying, well, you can have a cure, but you may not have healing, and you may have healing, but you may not have a cure, and we need to distinguish those two, because healing can be within, like at the end of life, healing in the family, and I said, healing doesn't always mean cure, and cure does not mean that there's healing. So we need to, and we're about healing, relationships, and with yourself, with each other, with your own body. So I think those are just some things that I'm glad to hear that they are taking that more of a decisive step in that direction.
Mhm.
Well, thank you all. I want more dialogue this next time. So I really, in 2 weeks, is more of a full dialogue and discussion on formative and summative assessment. So I invite you to bring an assignment you're doing that you'd like to share with others, and we can learn and grow together, and explore formative and summative assessments in a deeper way. I think it's so much better when we do this work together. So if you have an idea for an assignment and you'd like to get some feedback on it, please. This is the arena where we can really come together as colleagues and support one another so that we can create transformative learning for our students. Yeah. So, any final thoughts? Thank you for your time. Again, please bring activities in 2 weeks. Bring some assignments. We'll go through them.
Have a good spring break, everybody.
Yes, enjoy.
Oh, that's right. That's coming up.
I never even know. I just whoosh right through.
I know.
Yeah.
I forgot that that was next week. Okay.
Somehow
All
didn't
right.
get on my calendar. So,
So Sarah, will there be an email with the recording link so
yeah,
I can
that'll come
catch
out
up?
from Carolina. We'll send that out. Uh-huh.
Okay. And then there'll be another follow-up on March 18th, again at noon?
Same
Yes.
time, in 2 weeks.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you so much. See you then.
Sarah, could you send that article, please, as well?
You guys, I wrote your names down. I'll send it to each.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you so
Bye.
much. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.